The radio crackled with a voice that shouldn't exist. Sergeant Reese Maddox pressed his back against sun-baked stone, counted the seconds until the next burst of machine gun fire tried to find him, and listened to impossible salvation speaking through his headset. Talon 6, this is Guardian Angel. I have visual on your position. Heavy machine guns 600 meters northeast. Prepare for suppression. Maddox had 42 years of life experience. 20 of those years spent in deserts where radios brought news of who lived and who died. He knew every call sign assigned to this operation. Guardian Angel wasn't one of them. Guardian Angel, identify yourself and your position. No response. Just the crack of a single rifle shot splitting the night like God's judgment made audible. 600 meters away, the machine gun that had been systematically destroying Alpha Team went silent. The gunner dropped. Just dropped. No warning. No second chance. One shot, one kill from a position no one had mentioned in the briefing. The valley fell silent. 22 American SEALs who'd accepted they were already dead men stopped dying long enough to wonder what miracle had just interrupted their execution. Maddox keyed his radio again. Guardian Angel, I repeat, identify yourself. Still no answer, but another shot rang out, then another. Systematic, professional. Precision, shifting from someone who knew exactly what they were doing and refused to waste words explaining it. Beside Maddox, Corporal Lyle Garrett, callsign Boomer, wiped blood from a face laceration and spoke the question everyone was thinking. Boss, who the hell is that? Maddox watched through his rifle scope as enemy positions collapsed under fire from an invisible marksman who moved between shots like smoke, never firing from the same location twice. Professional counter-sniper doctrine executed by someone who'd learned it the hard way. I don't know, Maddox said, but they're the only reason we're still breathing. What Maddox didn't know, couldn't know, was that 72 hours earlier, he'd made a decision that should have kept Guardian Angel safe in the rear with communications equipment and orders that didn't involve climbing impossible ridges in darkness while bleeding from a shoulder wound. What Maddox didn't know was that Guardian Angel was a 27-year-old woman he'd spent 3 months systematically underestimating because she reminded him of a daughter who died doing brave things that bravery couldn't protect her from. What Maddox didn't know was about to save his life and change everything he thought he understood about limits and capability and the difference between protection and opportunity. But that understanding would come later, paid for in blood and sacrifice, and the kind of costs that left permanent scars on everyone who survived to carry them. The story of how Guardian Angel reached that ridge, made those impossible shots, and saved 22 lives while losing 5 began 3 days earlier, when Reese Maddox made the mistake of confusing caring for someone with keeping them from becoming who they needed to be. Sangre de Cristo Mountains, 10 years before Emma Caldwell was 17 when her father taught her the lesson that would save 22 lives a decade later. They'd been hunting in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains for 3 days. Her father, Malcolm, 63, and weathered by New Mexico sun. Emma, 17, and certain she understood the world. Her younger brother, Ethan, 14, and gangly in the way boys grow faster than their coordination can handle. Malcolm stopped at a granite outcropping overlooking 3 valleys, pointed to a ridge 2,000 yards distant where a bull elk grazed in shadow. Could you make that shot, mija? Emma studied the distance, the wind, the impossible math. No, sir, too far. Wind's unpredictable. Good answer. Malcolm's face showed the lines that decades of squinting into sun and wind carved into men who lived outdoors. Know your limits, but understand something. Limits change. A shot impossible today might be necessary tomorrow. When that day comes, you take it anyway. He turned to face both his children. Morning light caught the gray in his hair. You don't need many shots in life, but the ones you take have to count for everything. Not because you're proving something, because someone's counting on you. Missing means they pay the price. Ethan, 14, and full of certainty the way young boys are, spoke up. Dad, when I grow up, I'm going to be a sniper. Just like Em. Malcolm smiled, sad in the way parents smile when they know the world will hurt their children in ways they can't prevent. Maybe you will, son, but remember this. The gun doesn't make you dangerous. Taking the shot when everyone else hesitates, that's what matters. 3 years ago, Ethan Caldwell died at 24 in a desert half a world from those mountains. Army Ranger. Killed during a hostage rescue when their designated sniper froze and Ethan tried to make an impossible shot with a rifle he wasn't trained on. Emma had been 24 when the notification officers arrived. She remembered the smell of coffee, the morning sunlight, the precise words. Killed in action during combat operations. 6 months later, a letter arrived. Not official. Private correspondence from Captain Silas Mercer, Ethan's team leader. Your brother died trying to save hostages after our designated marksman couldn't take a 700-meter shot. Ethan saw what it meant, tried to improvise, moved from cover. Enemy fire found him. He died doing what Rangers do. I'm sorry. Emma burned that letter after the 40th reading. Then she enlisted. She told herself it was about honor, legacy, service. But late at night, honesty became unavoidable. Emma enlisted because somewhere in a desert, a sniper had frozen, had let fear matter more than lives, had decided impossible was reason enough not to try. She enlisted to become the sniper who never froze, who never missed when missing meant death, who took impossible shots because someone was counting on her and missing meant they paid the price. Coronado, the invisible woman. Naval Amphibious Base Coronado sprawled across California coastline like a factory designed to transform civilians into warriors through systematic application of stress and selection. Emma Caldwell arrived on a Tuesday with a duffel bag and 3 years of grief she'd forged into determination, harder than the desert stone where her brother had died. Sniper selection trials, 37 candidates, 4 slots. Emma was the only woman. She felt their eyes. Not hostile exactly. Dismissive. The looks men give someone they've already written off as irrelevant. The trials lasted 3 days. 600 meters, 800, 1,000, 1,200. Wind estimation, moving targets, unknown distances. Emma advanced through every round with groupings so tight you could cover them with a playing card. The final test was simple and brutal. 1,500 meters, single shot, unknown wind, a target barely visible through spotting scopes. Emma was third to shoot. First candidate missed by 2 feet, second missed by 8 inches. Emma ran her calculations, waited for the wind, fired, center mass, perfect hit. 2 days later, the selection results posted. Emma Caldwell's name wasn't there. She found Sergeant Reese Maddox in his office that smelled of gun oil and coffee gone cold. 42 years old. Face showing the map of Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, places where the desert tried to kill you and sometimes succeeded. Specialist Caldwell. His voice carried cigarettes and authority. I assume you're here about selection. Yes, Sergeant. I'd like to know why I wasn't selected despite having the highest scores. Maddox leaned back. He looked tired in the way men look when they've made decisions they know are right but feel wrong. The Barrett M82 weighs 32 pounds. Add gear you're carrying 70 to 80 pounds. You're 5'4" and weigh maybe 130. This isn't about whether you can shoot. It's about whether you can get to position, make the shot, and extract. I carried full combat load through every evolution, Sergeant. In training, over miles, not days. He paused. I've assigned you to communications. You'll support sniper operations from Tactical Operations Center. That's not sniper work. No, it's not. Maddox stood, moved to his window. Outside candidates ran obstacles designed to break them. 4 years ago, I had a daughter, Lily, 19, determined, reminded me of you. His voice went flat, the flatness of old wounds that hadn't healed. She wanted to be a combat medic, made it through every school, got assigned to a forward unit. 6 weeks in country, her convoy hit an IED. She died crawling back to pull out wounded Marines. He turned. His eyes showed something raw. I can't change what happened to Lily, but I can keep you from situations where determination matters less than body mass. That's not sexism, Caldwell. That's physics. Emma understood then. This wasn't rejection. This was protection wrapped in policy. Maddox wasn't trying to keep her down. He was trying to keep her alive. But understanding didn't mean acceptance. Sergeant, with respect, your daughter's death doesn't give you the right to make my choices. No, but my rank does. You're assigned to communications. Dismissed. The nickname started that afternoon, tag along, whispered in mess halls, seen in looks that said she'd been judged and found wanting. Only Corporal Nora Langford offered support. Logistics officer, 10 years service, eyes that had seen enough to know the difference between protecting and dismissing. Nora found Emma on the range one evening after official hours. Tagalong's a stupid nickname. Want to know what I call you? What? The woman who outshot every man in selection and got passed over because Maddox is fighting ghosts. Nora sat. You know about Lily. He told me. Everyone knows. Her death broke something in him. He sees her in every young woman who wants dangerous work. He's not trying to hurt you. He's trying to save a daughter who's already gone. That doesn't make it right. No, but it makes it understandable. Question is, what are you going to do? Emma looked at her rifle. Thought about Ethan. about frozen snipers and missed shots. I'm going to train. Every night, every hour I'm not on duty. When the moment comes, when lives hang on one shot, I'll be ready. Nora smiled. Good. And when that moment comes, tag along won't mean what they think it means. Forging in darkness, the training range closed at 2100 hours. Emma arrived at 2115 for 3 months straight. She climbed the fence where shadows made her invisible to patrols, found a section of impact area where spent rounds created legitimate reasons to be present if questioned. She brought her Barrett, ammunition purchased with her own money, rangefinders, wind meters, ballistic calculators, the systematic patience her father had taught in mountains where rushing meant dying. Night 1, just breathing, in for 4 counts, hold 4, out 4, hold 4. Repeat until her heart rate dropped below 60, even while lying on rocks that dug into ribs. Night 2, trigger control, 500 dry fires at imaginary targets, learning the trigger's breakpoint, pressing straight back without disturbing alignment. Night 3, live fire at rocks, distances measured by GPS, 300 meters, 500, 800. Learning how bullets behaved at different ranges, different winds, different temperatures when air density changed. She kept notebooks, meticulous, every shot recorded. Wind speed, direction, temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, data accumulated like scripture written specifically for her education in how physics and reality conspired against long-range shooting. Sometimes Nora joined her prayer and brought coffee and spotting scopes. They didn't talk much. The work spoke its own language. The training consumed her. Emma's body changed. Muscles developed from hauling 70 pounds of gear up slopes in darkness. Hands calloused from rock and recoil. Eyes learned to read wind and how distant vegetation swayed, how dust moved, how heat shimmer revealed air currents invisible to untrained observation. But the real transformation happened inside, where doubt lived, where fear whispered that Maddox was right, that physics and biology set limits she couldn't overcome through determination alone. Emma fought those whispers every night, fought them by making shots that shouldn't be possible, by carrying loads that should break her, by becoming something more dangerous than anyone suspected because they'd stopped looking once they decided she wasn't worth their attention. One night, Nora asked the question that mattered. What if they never give you a chance? Emma adjusted her scope. 800 meters away, a rock the size of a cantaloupe waited. Then I'll have spent 3 months becoming someone who can make impossible shots. That's not wasted. But it is if no one knows. Emma fired. The rock shattered. Someone will know when it matters. What Emma didn't tell Nora, didn't tell anyone, was what she thought about during those long nights with her rifle in darkness, stretching like an ocean. She thought about Ethan, his last moments, someone freezing when freezing meant death. She thought about her father's voice. Limits change. A shot impossible today might be necessary tomorrow. Most of all, she thought about the moment that was coming. She didn't know when, didn't know where, but Emma understood with absolute certainty that eventually somewhere someone would need a shot everyone said couldn't be made. And when that moment came, she would be ready. Not for glory, not for validation. Because Ethan had died when someone wasn't ready, and Emma had decided that story would not repeat if she had power to prevent it. The nickname tag-along stopped bothering her. Let them think she was just following along. Let them underestimate. Every assumption they made was another advantage when advantages determined who lived and who went home in boxes. Emma Caldwell was becoming something dangerous. Not despite being underestimated. Because of it. The mission. The call came Thursday morning in October. All personnel to briefing room 3. Captain Thaddeus Brennan presiding. Mandatory attendance. Emma filed in with communications section. Back row. Watched the room fill with men who would execute whatever Brennan was about to describe. Sergeant Maddox entered last. His presence commanded attention without announcement. He moved to the front beside a tactical display showing satellite imagery of desert that looked like every other desert in every other war. Captain Brennan, 52, silver-haired, stepped to the podium. Command presence earned through decades of making decisions where wrong choices meant good men died. Gentlemen, Caldwell. He nodded to Emma. Hostage situation. 3 American engineers captured 6 days ago. Current intelligence places them here. The display shifted. Aerial view. Buildings around a central courtyard. Mud brick. Single story. Typical. Hostage takers or local militia. Approximately 20 fighters. Lightly armed. Standard small arms, possibly RPGs. No heavy weapons. No sophisticated air defense. Brennan continued. Insertion by helicopter. Night operation, 4 teams, Alpha for assault, Bravo for support, Charlie for demolitions, Delta for command and communications. Emma listened with the attention of someone who knew they wouldn't participate but wanted to understand anyway. Communications will establish tactical operations center at Rally Point Delta, 1 kilometer from target. Specialist Caldwell maintains radio contact and coordinates support requests. Maddox added perspective. Straightforward extraction. Insecure hostages out. Weather optimal. No complications anticipated. Questions. Boomer Garrett raised his hand. 38. Demolitions expert. 15 years service. Reputation for humor that made terrible situations marginally bearable. Sergeant Sniper support. That compound's surrounded by elevated positions perfect for Overwatch. Maddox shook his head. Sniper team deployed elsewhere. We won't have dedicated long-range support. Teams provide mutual covering fire. Emma studied the imagery with different eyes. She saw what they weren't discussing, a ridge north of the compound, elevated. Clear lines of sight to the entire operational area. Distance from ridge to compound, approximately 800 meters. Perfect for Overwatch. She said nothing. Communications specialist didn't offer tactical suggestions. After the briefing, Emma returned to quarters, pulled tactical maps, found the compound, found the northern ridge, measured distances with meticulous care. The ridge was accessible, difficult but accessible, climbing through darkness over terrain that would challenge experienced mountaineers. But Emma had grown up in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. She knew how to read rock, how to find paths that existed only for those who knew how to look. She studied approach routes, memorized elevations, calculated time required to reach the ridge from Rally Point Delta. 2 hours, maybe less if she moved fast. Emma told herself she was just doing her job. Communications specialists should understand tactical terrain. But late that night, lying in her bunk while communications section slept, Emma understood what she was really doing. She was planning for the moment when straightforward extractions stopped being straightforward, when 20 lightly armed militia became something else, when mutual covering fire proved inadequate. She was planning for the moment when someone would need a shot from that northern ridge, even though everyone had decided it was tactically impractical. Emma checked her gear. Barrett cleaned and calibrated. 30 rounds, rangefinder, night vision, rock climbing gloves, medical kit, everything she needed to be the sniper no one asked for but everyone might need. Into the valley, the helicopter flight took 47 minutes. 4 Blackhawks carrying 22 SEALs, and 1 communications specialist into terrain that had killed invaders since before America existed. Emma sat in the third bird's rear, Barrett between her knees, harness digging into shoulders with every turbulence. Around her, assault teams prepared with the quiet, methodical way of professionals who'd done this enough to know adrenaline was the enemy of precision. Sergeant Maddox sat across from her, caught her eye once, held her gaze for a moment that communicated volumes. Stay safe. Follow orders. Don't do anything that makes me regret keeping you from a desk job. Emma nodded, let him think she understood and agreed. Beside Maddox sat Boomer Garrett, checking detonators with casual attention most people gave tying shoes. Next to him, Quinn Holbrook, 23, youngest, first combat operation. Hands shook slightly as he checked his rifle for the 4th time. Doc Nathaniel Voss, 45, the team medic, caught Emma's attention and raised his coffee thermos in mock toast. His eyes showed the dark humor of men who'd seen enough wounds to know optimism was luxury. The pilot's voice crackled. 2 minutes to LZ, weather clear, no hostile activity detected. The helicopters descended like predatory birds. Moonlight painted desert in silver and shadow, beautiful in the way dangerous things are when viewed from safe distances. 30 seconds out, Emma felt the shift. That change in air pressure and probabilities soldiers recognize when they've spent enough time where death waits with infinite patience. Something was wrong. The valley was too quiet. Intelligence too clean. 20 militia, 1 compound, no demands, no complications. The helicopters touched down. Rotor wash kicked up sand clouds. Emma moved with the communications team toward Rally Point Delta, 10 meters from the helicopter, when the world exploded. Machine gun fire erupted from positions that shouldn't exist. Not 1 or 2 guns, a dozen, coordinated, pre-positioned, professional. RPGs streaked through darkness like malevolent shooting stars. The first Black Hawk took a direct hit to its tail rotor. The aircraft spun, crashed hard. Threw Marines like dice across sand that became a killing ground. Maddox's voice cut through radio chaos with forced calm. All teams, heavy fire. This is prepared ambush. Scatter and find cover. Alpha Northeast. Bravo buildings at 3 o'clock. Charlie defensive position in rubble. Emma dove behind collapsed wall as bullets chewed stone with the sound of malice made audible. She could see teams scattering trying to establish positions that might let them survive long enough to understand what was happening. This wasn't 20 lightly armed militia. This was a battalion with professional training and equipment. Someone had known they were coming. Someone had prepared. Radio traffic told a story of collapse. Alpha pinned elevated positions. Bravo taking RPGs multiple directions. Charlie heavy machine guns. Request immediate air support. Maddox call base. Talon 6, heavily engaged superior force. Intelligence catastrophically wrong. Request immediate extraction. The response crushed hope. Talon 6 negative on air support. Weather prevents helicopter operations. You're on your own until dawn. Dawn was 7 hours away. Emma looked at her watch. Did the mathematics soldiers do when mathematics determine whether they see another sunrise? 22 Americans. 200 plus enemies. 7 hours until support. Ammunition for maybe 45 minutes. Through gaps in the wall, Emma saw Corporal Finn Ashford moving between positions. 24 years old. Engaged to be married next month. He was establishing a firing line when the enemy sniper found him. Center mass. He dropped instantly. Doc Voss crawled through fire that should have killed him. Reached Ashford. Checked pulse. Looked up at Maddox. Shook his head once. Their first casualty. Not their last. 30 seconds later, an RPG struck near Boomer's position. The explosion threw him against stone. Shrapnel tore his left leg. Boomer screamed, then bit down, turned it into rage. Doc crawled to him, started field dressing a wound bleeding too fast. Emma watched from rear position. Watched good men die or bleed or fight against odds that said this night would end with all of them in body bags. She was communications specialist. Her job was maintain radio contact, coordinate support that wasn't coming, follow orders that made sense in briefing rooms but meant death in reality. She thought about Ethan, about a sniper who froze. She looked at the northern ridge, barely visible in moonlight, 800 meters from current position. Maybe 1,200 to the compound where enemy had established machine guns and half-arm RPGs. Everyone said that ridge was tactically impractical. Too difficult. No value in the time it would take. Emma understood with absolute certainty that everyone was wrong. That ridge was the only position that mattered. The only place where one person with the right rifle and right skills could change mathematics that currently said 22 Americans would die in this valley. Maddox's voice through her radio. All teams prepare for last stand defensive positions. We hold what we have. We make them pay for every meter. Emma made her decision with the clarity that comes when all other options are exhausted. She keyed her radio one final time. Communications, maintaining position. It was a lie, a necessary lie. The kind that meant court-martial if she survived, but didn't matter if everyone died. Emma Caldwell grabbed her Barrett spare ammunition rangefinder, began moving toward the northern ridge, moving toward the impossible climb everyone said couldn't be made, moving toward the position where one shot might mean the difference between 22 men going home or going into the ground. Behind her, battle intensified, men fighting, men dying, men buying time they didn't have for support that wasn't coming. Ahead, the ridge rose against stars like a challenge written in stone. Emma climbed. The northern ridge rose 800 meters vertical through terrain designed to break the foolish and kill the unprepared. Emma Caldwell climbed through darkness so complete that even with night vision, the world reduced itself to one handhold at a time, one foothold, one breath, one decision to continue when every muscle screamed for surrender. The Barrett M82 strapped across her back weighed 32 pounds. With ammunition rangefinder and minimal gear, she carried 53 pounds on a frame that weighed 128. Basic physics said this was impossible, that a woman her size couldn't climb this grade with this load in this darkness. Emma had stopped listening to what physics said about impossibilities somewhere around the third year of night training when she'd carried 70 pounds through the Coronado obstacle course just to prove to herself that limits were negotiable. Sharp granite tore at her hands. She'd removed her gloves after the first 100 meters because she needed to feel the rock needed that direct contact to read the stone's language of cracks and edges and holds that would support her weight. Blood made her grip slippery. She wiped her palms on her pants and kept climbing. Below, the sounds of battle painted an audio portrait of men dying in increments. The steady rhythm of machine gun fire, the crack of rifles, the crump of explosions that meant RPGs finding targets. Screaming, not the movie kind of screaming that heroes do. The real screaming of men who'd been hurt in ways that bodies weren't designed to survive. Emma climbed faster. Her left shoulder throbbed where she'd taken a grazing hit during the initial ambush. Not serious enough to stop her. Serious enough that every pull upwards sent pain radiating down her arm like electricity seeking ground. She welcomed it. Pain meant she was still alive, still moving, still capable of making this matter. Halfway up, disaster struck with the casual indifference that characterized how gear failed in combat. Emma's rifle strapped across her back struck an outcropping. The impact transferred through her entire frame. She heard something crack, felt something shift. She stopped, hung on the rock face by fingers that were going numb. Slowly, carefully, she worked the Barrett around to examine it. The scope. The lens had cracked, a spiderweb fracture across the front element that would distort everything she saw through it. Emma stared at that crack in the way people stare at futures collapsing. Her entire plan required precision, shooting at distances where a scope was the difference between hitting and hoping. With a damaged scope, she'd be guessing, compensating, fighting against equipment failure on top of every other variable that wanted to kill accuracy. She could turn back. Return to Rally Point Delta. Report that the ridge climb was impossible with damaged equipment. No one would blame her. No one had asked her to make this climb in the first place. Emma thought about her father's voice from a morning in mountains that seemed like they existed in someone else's life. Limits change. A shot that's impossible today might be necessary tomorrow. She thought about Ethan dying in a desert when a sniper froze. She thought about 22 men fighting below against odds that mathematics had already written off as terminal. Emma adjusted the rifle back into position and resumed climbing. Damaged scope or not, she'd make it work. She'd compensate. She'd remember her father's backup training for when modern technology failed and old skills became the only skills that mattered. Iron sights never fail. Trust your training. 43 minutes after beginning the climb, Emma pulled herself over the final edge onto the ridgeline. Her lungs burned. Her hands were torn and bleeding. Her shoulder felt like someone was driving nails through bone. She lay on granite still warm from the day's sun and allowed herself 30 seconds to remember what breathing felt like when it wasn't competing with exhaustion and terror. Then she moved to establish her firing position. The ridgetop offered everything tactical doctrine said it should. Clear lines of sight to the valley below. Multiple positions for shot placement. Natural defilade from enemy observation. Emma settled among granite boulders, arranged herself. Prone brought the Barrett to her shoulder. Through her damaged scope, the valley spread out below like a deadly chessboard illuminated by muzzle flashes and burning wreckage. She could see every enemy position, every machine gun nest, every RPG team, every advantage the insurgents had established through careful planning and professional execution. But she could also see something else, something that ground-level perspective made invisible. The patterns, the weak points, the key positions that, if eliminated, would collapse entire sections of the enemy's coordinated assault. Emma noticed something that made her pause. Fresh cigarette butts near her position. American brand, Marlboro Reds. Someone had been here recently. Watching. Planning. The butts weren't weathered. Maybe 2 days old. This wasn't random. Someone had scouted this ridge before the operation. Someone knew this position existed and had chosen not to use it. Or had been waiting for someone to use it. The thought triggered warning bells, but Emma filed it away. Questions for later, if later existed. Right now, 22 men needed her to be something other than a communications specialist who'd been told to stay in the rear. She settled her breathing, controlled her heart rate, became the weapon her father had started forging 17 years ago, in mountains where missing meant going hungry, not going home in a flag-draped box. Emma acquired her first target, heavy machine gun position, 600 meters. The gun itself wasn't the target. The gunner was. She ran calculations that had become so automatic they happened faster than conscious thought. Distance, wind, the slight refraction from her cracked scope that she'd have to account for by aiming 2 inches right of where she wanted the bullet to go. She breathed in, breathed out, let her finger take up the trigger's slack. The Barrett fired with a crack that split the night like judgment made audible. 600 meters away, the machine gunner dropped. The gun went silent. The entire valley seemed to pause, confused by this sudden shift in dynamics. Maddox's voice cut through the radio disbelief and desperate hope fighting for dominance in those 4 words. Who the hell fired that? Emma didn't answer. She was already acquiring target number 2. For the next 12 minutes, Emma Caldwell systematically dismantled a battalion-sized enemy force with the precision of a surgeon removing tumors from vital organs. Every shot mattered. Every target eliminated changed the tactical balance in favor of the surrounded Americans. RPG teams went down. The heavy weapons that could destroy defensive positions disappeared as their operators learned that standing in the open meant death from an invisible source. Radio operators dropped their communications gear, scattering across sand, leaving enemy units blind and uncoordinated. Spotters for mortar teams vanished, taking with them the ability to call accurate, indirect fire on American positions. Emma changed position after every 2 shots. Basic counter-sniper doctrine. Never fire from the same location twice. Never give enemy marksmen the opportunity to triangulate your position and return fire. She moved through the ridge top like smoke, using shadows and stone formations for concealment. The night vision-capable enemies would be looking for her, searching for the sniper who was killing their offensive with shots that seemed to come from nowhere. Below, the American teams recognized what was happening. Maddox's voice on the radio carried new energy, the kind that came when men who'd accepted death suddenly realized survival might be negotiable. All teams unknown friendly, providing sniper support. Move northeast under covering fire. Unknown friendly. Guardian angel. The call sign would stick. Emma knew would become part of the legend that would grow around this night if anyone survived to tell it. But legends required living long enough to become legendary, and Emma had just painted a target on her position that every competent enemy marksman would now be hunting. The counter-sniper found her on her 9th shot. Emma was relocating after eliminating a mortar crew when bullets began impacting around her position with the kind of precision that said these weren't random spray and pray. Someone good was shooting at her. Someone who'd spotted her muzzle flash and calculated her position with the speed that came from professional training. She dove behind a boulder as rounds ricocheted off granite, heard the distinctive crack of a high-powered rifle. Not an AK-47, something purpose-built for precision work. A sniper rifle. Emma's world contracted to the immediate mathematics of survival. Someone out there was hunting her with skills that matched or exceeded her own. Someone with better equipment, better position, possibly better training. The only advantage she had was that she knew this terrain, now having climbed it in darkness while memorizing every feature. She moved, not randomly, deliberately, using dead ground and shadows the way her father had taught her to use terrain as a weapon more valuable than any rifle. The enemy sniper fired again. Closer. He was reading her movements, anticipating her patterns. Emma did something that violated every instinct. She stopped moving, went completely still, behind cover, counted to 30 while bullets searched for her in places she wasn't. Then she saw it. A muzzle flash, 800 meters across the ridge, elevated position. The enemy sniper had established a hide that should have been invisible. But muzzle flash betrayed position the way it always did, and Emma had been watching for exactly that signature. She didn't have time for careful calculation. The enemy sniper would relocate after that shot. This was a snapshot opportunity measured in seconds. Emma brought her damage scope to bear, compensated for the crack's refraction, led the target based on likely movement pattern, and fired. The enemy position went silent. Emma waited, watched. No return fire. Either she'd hit him or he was doing exactly what she was doing, waiting for his opponent to give away position by moving. She waited 2 minutes. Then carefully, slowly, she shifted position to verify. Through her scope, she saw him. The enemy sniper collapsed across his rifle. Her shot had been high and right had caught him in the upper chest. At this distance, with the Barrett's .50 caliber round upper chest meant the same thing as center mass meant the same thing as headshot. Dead was dead regardless of which vital systems you destroyed. Emma felt nothing about killing him, no remorse, no satisfaction. Just the cold recognition that he'd been trying to kill her and she'd been faster. That was the entire moral calculus of sniping reduced to its essential truth. But as she moved back to her primary firing position, Emma felt something warm running down her left arm. She looked. Blood. More than there should be from torn hands. She touched her shoulder, felt the sticky wetness, understood what had happened. One of the counter-sniper's rounds hadn't missed as completely as she'd thought. Had grazed her shoulder, deepening the wound she'd taken during the initial ambush. Not fatal, not even particularly serious in terms of immediate danger. But bleeding. And bleeding meant weakness. Meant the clock was running on how long she could maintain effectiveness before blood loss and shock degraded her performance. Emma field dressed the wound with supplies from her medical kit, wrapped it tight, felt the pain dial up from manageable to significant, accepted that pain was the price of continuing. She had work to finish. For the next 20 minutes, Emma provided overwatch for the American teams as they maneuvered through chaos toward the compound where hostages were supposedly held. Every shot counted. Every target eliminated bought seconds or minutes that accumulated into the difference between survival and annihilation. She watched through her scope as the teams reached the compound, watched them breach the doors, waited for confirmation that this nightmare had at least accomplished its nominal objective. Maddox's voice came through the radio. Hostages secured, 3 American engineers confirmed, moving to extract. Then a different voice, older, weathered by experience and rank. This is Captain Silas Mercer. Whoever's providing overwatch, you just saved our lives. The enemy commander here is Marcus Vaughn, former U.S. Army sniper instructor. He planned this entire ambush. Emma's world tilted. Marcus Vaughn. She knew that name. Ethan had talked about Instructor Vaughn with the kind of respect young soldiers reserve for the teachers who showed them how to become dangerous. Fort Benning. Sniper school. The man who'd trained an entire generation of American marksmen. That man had gone rogue, had sold his expertise to the highest bidder, had planned this ambush using everything he knew about how American Special Operations Forces fought. And now he was out there in that valley organizing the enemy response with the same professional competence he'd once used to teach Americans how to survive. Mercer's voice continued, and Emma felt her past slam into her present with the force of collision. I was Army Ranger, team leader for Ethan Caldwell 3 years ago. If anyone named Caldwell is out there, I owe you an explanation about Syria. Emma's hands shook. She forced them still, forced her breathing to steady, forced everything except the mission to disappear into the background, where emotions couldn't interfere with accuracy. Captain Silas Mercer had been Ethan's team leader, the man who'd written that letter, the man who'd been there when her brother died because a sniper froze. Questions exploded in Emma's mind, but she pushed them down. Later, if there was a later. Right now the mission was extract the hostages and get everyone home alive. She keyed her radio for the first time since beginning this climb. Her voice came out steady despite everything churning inside. Talon 6, this is Guardian Angel. Enemy regrouping. Recommend extraction route Alpha 3. Silence. Then Maddox's voice confusion clear even through radio distortion. Guardian Angel, identify yourself. Emma hesitated. The moment she identified herself, everything changed. The mission became about her disobedience instead of about saving lives. But people needed to know who was providing overwatch, needed to understand that coordination required communication. Talon 6, this is Specialist Emma Caldwell. I'm on the northern ridge providing sniper support. More silence. Then Maddox's voice tight with anger and relief fighting for dominance. Caldwell, you disobeyed direct orders. You left your position without authorization. Yes, Sergeant. You climbed an 800-meter ridge in darkness carrying full sniper load. Yes, Sergeant. A pause. When Maddox spoke again, his voice carried something different. Respect, maybe, or the recognition that came when assumptions met reality and lost. Outstanding work, Specialist. Continue overwatch. We're moving to extraction. The professional acknowledgement would come later. The disciplinary action would come later. Everything except survival could wait for later. Marcus Vaughn had other plans. His voice boomed across the valley through loudspeakers, amplified and carrying the confidence of a man who'd spent 12 years teaching soldiers how to fight and now knew every doctrine they'd use. To the sniper on the northern ridge, impressive shooting. You've been trained well. Emma watched through her scope as a figure stepped into the open. Tall, mid-40s, moving with the economy of motion that came from decades of fieldcraft. Marcus Vaughn presented himself as a target confident that she wouldn't take the shot at this distance with this many variables. He was right. 1,100 meters, wind gusting unpredictably through the canyon, her damaged scope, her wounded shoulder. The shot was possible but not probable. Missing would give away her exact position and accomplish nothing. I taught Army snipers for 12 years. Vaughn continued, his voice carrying across stone walls like some kind of twisted professor addressing students. I recognize precision when I see it. Whoever you are, you've had excellent training. Emma said nothing, adjusted her position slightly, began running calculations for a shot she knew she shouldn't take but might have to. Your military abandoned me, Vaughn said, and now his voice carried something harder. Bitterness, maybe. The rage of betrayal. I reported corruption, theft, officers selling ammunition on the black market. They buried my reports and buried me. Ended my career, so I found employers who appreciate expertise. He paused, moved behind partial cover. Emma tracked him through her scope, waiting for the moment when opportunity and capability aligned. These men you're killing, they're defending their homeland against invaders. You're serving politicians who'll forget you before your body's cold. Think about which side is actually fighting for something that matters. Psychological warfare, classic technique. Make the enemy question their mission, their purpose, their moral authority. It worked on soldiers who were uncertain, who hadn't already processed the questions Vaughn was asking. Emma had processed those questions years ago. She wasn't here for politics or patriotism or abstract concepts about defending homelands. She was here because 22 Americans were fighting for their lives and she had the skills to help them survive. Everything else was noise. Maddox's voice on the radio. Guardian Angel, don't engage. He's baiting you, trying to get you to give away position. Emma had no intention of taking the bait, but Vaughn presented a target too valuable to ignore. He was the commander, the coordinator, the professional expertise organizing this battalion-sized force. Eliminate him and the entire enemy operation would lose cohesion. She waited for the perfect moment. Vaughn stopped, stood still for 2 seconds. Not long, but long enough. Emma fired. The Barrett bucked against her wounded shoulder. Pain exploded through her arm. She ignored it. Watched through her damaged scope as the bullet traveled 1,100 meters through air that wanted to push it off course. The round struck rock 6 inches to the left of Vaughn's position. He dove for cover, his voice booming with laughter that carried mockery. Close, but close doesn't count in war, does it? Emma's stomach dropped. She'd missed. After 17 perfect shots, she'd missed the one that mattered most. She recalculated immediately. Wind had shifted during bullet flight. The scope's crack had distorted her aim more than she'd compensated for. The combination of variables had pushed her shot left. Vaughn's voice continued, confidence growing. Whoever you are, you're good, but not perfect. I taught better. Emma adjusted her calculations, added more compensation for wind, increased her aim off for the scope damage. Vaughn appeared again, moving between cover positions. She let him, accounted for movement, fired. The shot missed by 8 inches right. Overcompensation from her previous correction. Vaughn laughed again. 2 misses. You're rattled. Tired, perhaps. Wounded, I can see blood on those rocks up there. You're bleeding out while trying to save people who'll never know your name. How did he know about the blood? Emma looked around her position. Saw the dark stains on granite where she'd been treating her shoulder. Vaughn had optics good enough to spot those from his position, which meant he had thermal imaging, which meant he could see her heat signature despite her attempts at concealment. She was compromised, wounded, fighting against equipment failure and a professional who knew every technique she might use because he'd probably taught those techniques to her instructors. Emma took a third shot, this time at Vaughn's last known position, hoping he'd return to cover. The round struck stone 4 inches from where she'd aimed. Another miss. 3 consecutive failures. 3 shots at the target that mattered most, and she'd missed all 3. The perfect record she'd built over months of night training, the 17 successful shots tonight. All of it meant nothing if she couldn't eliminate the one person who could turn this tactical defeat into a strategic massacre. Below, the American teams were moving, but their movement had slowed. The enemy, sensing that their mysterious sniper had lost effectiveness, pressed the attack with renewed aggression. In the 10 minutes Emma had struggled against Vaughn, the tactical situation deteriorated with the speed of controlled collapse. Machine gun fire raked across the American positions. An RPG struck near where Bravo team had established defensive cover. The explosion threw men against stone. Emma watched through her scope as PFC Jasper Drummond, 26 years old, disappeared in the blast. Simply ceased to exist as a living person in the span between one heartbeat and the next. Doc Voss crawled through fire that should have killed him to reach the remains. Came back shaking his head. 2 minutes later, mortar fire began falling with the kind of precision that said someone had reestablished coordination. The first round landed long, the second landed short, the third landed directly on Corporal Beckett Thorne's position. He'd been providing radio backup for Emma's communications section, 31 years old. His radio went silent in the way that radios go silent when their operators aren't alive to use them anymore. Doc Voss tried to reach him. Maddox pulled him back. Some wounds weren't survivable, and exposing yourself to reach the dead just created more dead. Emma watched it happen, watched good men die because she couldn't make the shot that mattered. Watched her failure cascade through the tactical situation like dominoes falling in patterns that ended with body counts. Her hands shook. Her shoulders screamed. Blood loss was making her lightheaded, making calculations that should have been automatic require conscious effort. She thought about Ethan, about the sniper who froze in Syria, about 700 meters being difficult but not impossible. Emma realized with sick clarity that she'd become the thing she'd sworn she'd never be. The sniper who couldn't make the shot when making the shot meant the difference between people living and dying. Maddox's voice cut through the radio, ragged with the knowledge that they were losing. All teams prepare for fighting withdrawal. Guardian Angel, fall back. You've done what you could. Fall back. Give up. Except that this mission had failed, and survival meant abandoning the tactical objective for the biological imperative of not dying. Emma looked through her scope at the valley below, looked at men fighting against mathematics that said they should already be dead, looked at the compound where hostages had been recovered, but extraction remained impossible as long as Vaughn organized effective resistance. She thought about her father's words from that morning in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. Sometimes impossible is just another word for what no one's tried yet. She thought about why she'd enlisted. Not for glory, not for validation. Because somewhere in her soul, Emma Caldwell had decided that freezing when freezing meant death was unacceptable. She steadied her breathing, wiped blood from her hands, adjusted her position despite the pain, began running new calculations with the grim determination of someone who understood that failure was only permanent if you stopped trying. 22 men needed her to be better than her previous 3 shots, better than her damaged equipment, better than her wounds and exhaustion, and the professional opponent who'd spent 12 years teaching people how to do exactly what she was trying to do. Emma chambered a new round, found Vaughn through her damaged scope, waited for the moment when impossible became merely difficult, and prepared to take the 4th shot at a target she'd already missed 3 times. 400 meters separated the American teams from the extraction point. 400 meters of open ground crossed by machine gun fire lanes and covered by mortar positions that Marcus Vaughn had established with the professional competence of a man who'd spent 12 years teaching others how to create killing zones. Emma watched through her damaged scope as Maddox coordinated the withdrawal. Teams moved in bounds, one element providing covering fire while another displaced. Textbook small unit tactics executed by men who knew that textbooks didn't account for being outnumbered 10 to 1 about. Boomer Garrett moved on one leg, the other useless from shrapnel wounds that Doc Voss had bandaged but couldn't repair. He hopped between cover positions using his rifle as a crutch, his face showing the kind of pain that strong men carried in silence because acknowledging it meant accepting limits. Emma provided what covering fire she could, but her effectiveness had degraded with each miss at Vaughn. Her shoulder throbbed. Blood loss made the world occasionally swim at the edges of her vision. The damaged scope turned precision, shooting into educated guessing. Vaughn's voice boomed across the valley, again amplified confidence, wrapped in tactical assessment. You're 400 meters from extraction, Americans. I have 80 fighters positioned between you and freedom. Your guardian angel has failed you. Surrender now and I'll allow evacuation of your wounded. Maddox didn't respond to the offer, didn't dignify psychological warfare with acknowledgement. He keyed his radio instead. All teams maintain movement. We don't leave people behind. But mathematics had become enemy as much as the fighters surrounding them. The teams carried 2 critically wounded, Boomer with his shredded leg, Corporal Wade Kincaid with chest wounds from the same RPG blast that had killed Jasper Drummond. Moving them meant moving slowly. Moving slowly meant exposure to fire that had already killed 3 and wounded 11. Emma watched Boomer stop behind cover, watched him key his radio, heard his voice cut through the tactical channel with words that soldiers recognized immediately as the kind that changed everything. Maddox, we need to talk. Private channel. A pause. Then Maddox's voice tight with the knowledge that private channels meant conversations about things that couldn't be said where everyone could hear. Go secure. Emma shouldn't have been monitoring secure channels. Communications specialists had access but weren't supposed to use it except for official traffic. She listened anyway because something in Boomer's tone said this mattered in ways that transcended protocol. Boomer's voice came through with the forced calm of decisions already made. Brother, listen. You've got 18 people who can move at combat speed. You've got 4 who can't. Math says you're not getting everyone out. We don't leave people behind. That's not negotiable. It is when leaving us behind means 19 people live instead of 22 people dying. Reese, I've known you for 15 years. You're my best friend. You stood up at my wedding. You're godfather to my kids. So hear me when I say this. You need to leave me and Kincaid here. Silence on the radio. The kind of silence that happened when words failed to contain the weight of what they needed to carry. Boomer continued. We'll establish defensive position. Hold this ground. Buy you 20 minutes, maybe 30. That's enough time to get the others to extraction. Enough time to get them home. Maddox's voice cracked. Lyle, I can't. Don't ask me to do that. I'm not asking, brother. I'm telling you, this is the play. Kincaid and I talked. We're both combat ineffective for movement, but we can still shoot. We can still hold ground. Let us do what we train for. Emma listened to the conversation with growing horror. She understood the mathematics, understood that Boomer was right. But understanding didn't make it acceptable, didn't make it something that happened in a world where people mattered more than tactical efficiency. Wade Kincaid's voice joined the channel. 35 years old, 12 years of service. Voice steady despite wounds that Emma could see were bleeding through field dressings. Sergeant Maddox Garrett's right. This is the mission. Get the package out. We'll cover your six. Maddox's voice, when it came back, carried the sound of a man breaking in real time. You're asking me to leave you here to die. We're asking you to let us buy our brothers' lives with ours. That's the deal we signed up for. That's what being a SEAL means. Emma wanted to scream, wanted to key her radio and tell them all that she'd find another way, make another shot, do something that meant good men didn't have to die to save other good men. But she'd already missed 3 shots at the target that mattered most. Her promises had lost credibility somewhere around the second failure. Maddox made the hardest decision of his life with words that came out barely above a whisper. Acknowledged. Garrett Kincaid, you've got 20 minutes to establish position. Make them count. Always do, brother. Tell my kids I held the line. Tell them their dad died doing something that mattered. Emma watched through her scope as Boomer and Kincaid positioned themselves in rubble that provided decent fields of fire toward the enemy positions. Watched Maddox grip Boomer's shoulder for a moment that contained 15 years of friendship and brotherhood and all the things men didn't know how to say except through action. Then Maddox moved out with the 17 survivors moving fast now, leaving behind 2 men who would die so others could live. The radio chatter over the next 18 minutes would haunt Emma for the rest of her life. Boomer's voice steady and professional, calling out targets. Kincaid, you've got 3 at your 2 o'clock. I'm taking the machine gun team. Gunfire. Explosions. The sounds of 2 men fighting a battle they knew would end only one way. They're flanking left, shifting fire. More gunfire. Closer now. Kincaid's down, still breathing, but he's done. Just me now. Boomer's voice stayed steady, calm. The voice of a man who'd accepted what was coming and decided to meet it standing up. Multiple targets closing. Out of grenades, low on ammunition. A pause, then Boomer's final transmission. Talon 6, tell them we held. Tell them static. Just static. The kind that meant radios went silent when their operators couldn't key them anymore. Maddox's voice came through Emma's headset, thick with grief that training couldn't suppress. Received, Boomer. You held. Rest easy, brother. Emma watched enemy forces swarm the position where 2 Americans had made their last stand. Watch them discover what 2 determined men with good fields of fire could accomplish in 18 minutes. The enemy had paid for that ground with bodies stacked in ways that said Boomer and Kincaid had made them earn every meter. But earning it didn't change the outcome. 2 more Americans dead. 3 total in the last hour. 5 since the mission began. Mathematics written in blood and sacrifice, and the kind of choices that broke people who had to make them. Emma's hands shook as she tracked her scope across the valley, looking for Vaughn, looking for the target that, if eliminated, might mean Boomer and Kincaid had bought enough time for their sacrifice to matter. Maddox's voice cut through her focus. Direct channel, just to her. Caldwell, I know it's you up there. I know you're trying, but you need to fall back. You're wounded. You've done everything you could. Emma keyed her response. Her voice came out steady despite everything churning inside. Sergeant, with respect, I haven't done enough. Garrett and Kincaid just died buying time. I owe them the shot that makes their sacrifice count. Emma, you've missed 3 times. That's not failure. That's combat against someone who's as good as you are. Maybe better. Know when to fold. My brother died because a sniper froze Sergeant. I won't be that sniper. Silence. Then a different voice. Older. Carrying the weight of years and rank and decisions that had cost lives. Captain Silas Mercer. Specialist Caldwell. Emma, I need to tell you something about Syria. Emma's world narrowed to that voice. The man who'd led Ethan's team. The man who'd written the letter that had changed everything. The sniper who froze in Syria. The one who couldn't take the 700-meter shot. That was me, Emma. I was the designated marksman, your brother's team leader. When the moment came when hostages needed someone to make an impossible shot through a window, barely 2 feet wide, I froze. Couldn't do it. Talked myself into all the reasons why missing would be worse than not trying. Emma felt something cold spreading through her chest. All this time, she'd imagined some faceless sniper, some stranger whose failure had killed her brother. Not the team leader, not the man who'd written that letter. Ethan saw me freeze. saw what it meant. He tried to take the shot himself with a rifle he wasn't trained on, moved from cover to get angle. That's when enemy fire found him. He died because I couldn't pull the trigger when pulling the trigger was the only thing that mattered. Mercer's voice cracked. I've lived with that for 3 years, watched it replay every night, told myself all the reasons why I was right to hesitate. But the truth is simpler and uglier. I was scared, scared of missing, scared of making it worse, scared of being the person whose failure everyone would remember. So I didn't try, and Ethan paid for my cowardice with his life. Emma couldn't speak, couldn't process what she was hearing fast enough to form response. Mercer continued, You've missed 3 shots tonight, Emma, but you took them. You didn't freeze, didn't let fear stop you from trying. That makes you better than I was, better than I am. Don't let perfectionism paralyze you the way it paralyzed me. 1 shot is all you need. The 4th shot, the one you're about to take, that's the only one that has to count. Emma found her voice. Captain, I don't know if I can make it. My scope's damaged. I'm wounded. I've already proven I can't hit him. No, you've proven you can't hit him using the same approach 3 times. So change approach. You're a hunter's daughter, Emma. Your father taught you things that weren't in any Army manual. Trust that training. Trust yourself. Take the shot. Maddox's voice joined in. Emma, Garrett, and Kincaid bought us 18 minutes. We're 300 meters from extraction. But Vaughn's organizing final assault. If he reaches us before evac arrives, their sacrifice means nothing. I need you to be something I told you you'd never be. I need you to be the sniper who makes impossible shots. Can you do that? Emma looked through her damaged scope at the valley below, found Vaughn through heat shimmer and darkness in the distortion of cracked glass. 1,250 meters, wind gusting unpredictably, her shoulder bleeding through fresh bandages, hands shaking from blood loss and exhaustion. Every variable said this shot was impossible. Emma remembered her father's voice from a morning in mountains that seemed like they belonged to someone else's life. Sometimes impossible is just another word for what no one's tried yet. She began her preparation with the methodical patience of someone who understood that rushing meant missing. And missing meant good men had died for nothing. The technical details mattered now more than ever. Emma ran calculations that had become automatic through thousands of hours of practice, but required conscious effort through the fog of blood loss and exhaustion. Distance 1,250 meters. Bullet flight time approximately 1.5 seconds. Wind 15 miles per hour crosswind, gusting to 22. Variable. Reading wind at this distance required watching how it moved terrain features. Dust patterns, heat shimmer, the way distant vegetation swayed. Emma had been watching those patterns for hours now. Knew how air moved through this valley, the way sailors knew how water moved through channels they'd navigated their entire lives. Bullet drop at this range, the .50 BMG round would drop approximately 32 feet. Emma's scope was calibrated for this, but the crack in the lens created refraction that threw off the calculation by an additional 2 inches. Target movement, Vaughn was repositioning, moving between cover points. He stopped every 12 seconds to radio commands to his forces. That was the pattern. 12 seconds of movement, 2 seconds stationary repeat. Emma's physical condition, shoulder wound bleeding, blood loss creating lightheadedness, hands shaking, exhaustion making fine motor control. Difficult. Scope damage. The crack created a prismatic effect that bent light passing through it. Emma had compensated for this in her previous 3 shots, but had overcorrected, then undercorrected, then overcorrected again. The key wasn't compensating more. It was compensating differently. She remembered her father's backup training. The lessons he'd taught for when modern equipment failed and old skills became the only skills that mattered. Iron sights. Trusting instinct over instrumentation. Reading natural signs instead of relying on technology. Emma looked at her iron sights. Basic, simple. No moving parts to break, no glass to crack, just metal posts that aligned when the rifle pointed where she wanted the bullet to go. She could use the scope for ranging and wind estimation, but for the actual shot, she'd rely on iron sights, the way her father had taught her, the way hunters had been making long shots for centuries before scopes existed. It was insane. Iron sights at 1,200 meters was something people did for fun at shooting competitions, not for real-world combat where missing meant people died. But Emma had been doing insane things since she climbed an 800-meter ridge that everyone said was impossible. She settled into her final firing position, controlled her breathing, let her heart rate drop below 60 beats per minute despite the adrenaline and fear and desperation that wanted to make it race. Watched Vaughn's pattern. 12 seconds moving. 2 seconds still. Repeat. Calculated wind drift. 18 inches right at this range with current conditions. Accounted for bullet drop using reference points in the terrain instead of scope markings. Led Vaughn's movement pattern by 8 inches to account for where he'd be when the bullet arrived 1.5 seconds after firing. Emma stopped aiming for perfection, started aiming for center mass. Not a headshot, not trying to thread some impossible needle, just putting a .50 caliber round somewhere in the largest target she could hit. Chest, abdomen, anywhere in the torso that a bullet designed to penetrate light armor and destroy engine blocks would be immediately fatal. She thought about Ethan, about Boomer and Kincaid, about Finn Ashford and Jasper Drummond and Beckett Thorne, about all the people who'd paid prices they shouldn't have had to pay because combat didn't care about fairness. Emma whispered the prayer her father had taught her before every shot that mattered. One shot, make it count. The Barrett bucked against her wounded shoulder. Pain exploded through her arm with intensity that made her vision white out for half a second. She blinked through it, forced herself to watch through the scope as the bullet traveled 1,250 meters through air that wanted to push it off course. From his position, 400 meters from extraction, Maddox watched through binoculars as Marcus Vaughn prepared to lead the final assault on the American positions. Watched him stand in the open radioing final instructions to units that would overwhelm 17 wounded men in minutes. Maddox didn't believe in prayer generally. Had seen too much of what the universe did to good people to maintain faith in anything benevolent, watching over humanity. But in that moment, watching Vaughn organize the assault that would kill everyone, including himself, Maddox prayed. Prayed that a 27-year-old communications specialist lying wounded on a ridge 800 meters away could make a shot that shouldn't be possible. Prayed that his decision to score her evaluation low to protect her by keeping her away from danger hadn't robbed the team of the one person who could save them when protection became irrelevant. Prayed that impossible was negotiable. He watched Vaughn through his binoculars. Watched the man stop moving. Stand still for a moment that Maddox measured in heartbeats. Then Vaughn's radio dropped. His body jerked backward. He staggered. Collapsed. The sound of the shot reached Maddox's position a second later. The distinctive crack of a Barrett M82 firing from long range. Maddox keyed his radio with hands that shook from relief and disbelief. Guardian Angel confirmed target status. Emma's voice came through steady despite pain and exhaustion. Target down. Vaughn is eliminated. Hostile forces losing cohesion. Maddox watched as enemy fighters seeing their commander fall to an invisible sniper who just made an impossible shot after missing 3 times began retreating. Not organized withdrawal. Panic. The kind that happened when professional soldiers realized they were fighting something beyond their understanding. Outstanding shooting, Caldwell. Extraction in 5 minutes. Get off that ridge and get to the LZ. Emma didn't respond immediately. When her voice came back, it carried the weight of costs paid and prices extracted. Sergeant Garrett and Kincaid, did their sacrifice buy enough time? Maddox looked at the 17 survivors around him. Wounded, bleeding, alive. Yeah, Emma, it bought enough. They held the line. You made it count. That's all any of us can do. Dawn broke across the desert as extraction helicopters arrived at the LZ. Maddox counted survivors the way commanders do, when mathematics means faces instead of numbers. 17 of 22 original team members, 5 dead, 11 wounded, everyone carrying damage visible and invisible that would last long after wounds healed. Emma Caldwell descended from the northern ridge as the sun painted the eastern sky in shades of orange and red that looked like the world burning at its edges. She moved slowly, favoring her wounded shoulder, her hands torn and bloody from the climb and the recoil in the rifle that had become extension of her will. Maddox watched her approach. She wasn't what he'd expected, not young and fresh and unmarked by what she'd done. Emma looked like someone who'd been through a meat grinder and come out the other side still functional but fundamentally changed. Her uniform was soaked with blood, dried on her shoulder where she'd been shot, fresh on her hands where rock and recoil had torn flesh. Her face showed exhaustion so complete that staying upright seemed like it required active concentration. The Barrett M82 hung across her shoulders like a cross she'd carried up a mountain and couldn't put down even though the climb was finished. Maddox met her halfway between the ridge and the helicopters. They stood 3 feet apart in sand that had soaked up blood and explosions and the sounds of men dying. For a long moment, neither spoke. What did you say to someone who'd saved your life after you'd spent months telling them they weren't capable? What did you say to someone who'd disobeyed every order and been right to disobey? Emma spoke first, Her voice came out hoarse, damaged by dehydration and screaming through pain she'd refused to acknowledge. "Sergeant, I'm sorry about Garrett, Kincaid, the others. If I'd made those first 3 shots." Maddox cut her off with words that came from somewhere deeper than rank or protocol. "Emma, you saved 17 lives. Don't carry the 5 we couldn't save. That's my burden to bear, not yours. I missed 3 times. Garrett and Kincaid died while I was missing. Garrett and Kincaid died buying time for their brothers to escape. You made that time mean something by putting down the one person who could have made their sacrifice worthless. Different roles, same mission, same outcome. 17 people going home who shouldn't be alive." Captain Mercer approached, moving carefully on a leg that had taken shrapnel during extraction. 47 years old, face showing the map of deployments and decisions that had cost him sleep for 3 years. He stopped in front of Emma. His eyes showed something raw and unhealed. "Your brother would be proud, Emma." Emma's composure cracked. Tears cut tracks through the grime on her face. "I missed 3 times, Captain. Ethan never missed." Mercer's voice went soft, gentle in the way men become gentle when delivering truths that hurt but heal. "That's not true. Ethan missed constantly in training. He was good, but he wasn't perfect. No one is. And in Syria, when I froze, Ethan tried to take the shot I couldn't take. He missed too. Wide left. That's why he moved. Why enemy fire found him." Emma stared at Mercer like he'd just rewritten history in ways that changed how past made sense. "The lesson isn't perfect shooting, Emma. It's taking the shot when it matters, even when you're terrified you'll miss. You did that. Took 4 shots at a target that should have been impossible. Missed 3 times and took the 4th anyway. That's not failure. That's courage. That's what being a warrior means." Mercer pulled something from his pocket. Dog tags. Worn. Carried for 3 years by a man who'd turned them into penance. "I've carried these since Syria. Ethan's tags. Guilt made manifest. Et tomam pempes. But you taught me something tonight. We honor the dead by living up to their standards, not being destroyed by our failures." He handed the tags to Emma. She took them with hands that shook from more than exhaustion, closed her fingers around metal that had touched her brother's skin, around the physical proof that Ethan Caldwell had existed and mattered and died trying to do something impossible. "You're a better shot than I ever was, Emma. Better than I could have been. Ethan knew that. I know it now. Carry his memory, but don't carry my guilt. That's mine to bear." The helicopters lifted off carrying 17 survivors and 5 flag-draped transfer cases. Emma sat in the back of the 3rd Bird Barrett rifle across her knees, Ethan's dog tags clutched in her fist. She didn't speak during the flight, didn't need to. Everything that mattered had been said, or done, or paid for in blood and sacrifice, and the kind of prices that left permanent marks. 1 week later, Naval Amphibious Base Coronado held a memorial service for 5 American warriors who died in a desert that would forget them before their bodies were cold. Sergeant Reese Maddox delivered the eulogy for Boomer Garrett. His voice cracked when he talked about 15 years of friendship, about a man who'd volunteered to die so his brothers could live, about the kind of courage that looked like mathematics written in sacrifice. Emma Caldwell sat in the back row of the chapel. Not in uniform, she'd been placed on administrative review for unauthorized action, disobeying direct orders, leaving assigned position, acting without authorization. The words made what she'd done sound criminal instead of necessary. Captain Brennan faced a political problem without good solutions. Punish the person who'd saved 17 lives or reward someone who'd violated every principle of military discipline. The brass argued about medals and courts-martial, while Emma sat in administrative limbo. Nora Langford found Emma after the service, sat beside her on a bench overlooking training ranges where the next generation ran evolutions that would prepare them for moments when preparation met chaos. "The board made their decision," Nora said. "No court-martial, but no medal either. Letter of reprimand for disobeying orders. Quiet commendation buried in classified files. Transfer to different unit effective in 30 days. Emma nodded. She'd expected this. The military couldn't punish heroism publicly, but it couldn't reward disobedience either. So it would do what institutions always did when principles conflicted. Split the difference and move the problem somewhere else. Maddox testified, Nora continued. Told them you'd saved 17 lives, including 3 hostages. Said if we punish soldiers for making the right call when doctrine fails reality, we don't deserve people like you. What did Brennan say? That you'd created a precedent problem. That if everyone disobeys orders when they think they know better, chain of command collapses. That discipline matters as much as capability. Emma understood both perspectives. Understood that Maddox and Brennan were both right. That she'd saved lives by breaking rules, and that rules existed because individuals making individual decisions created chaos more often than they created salvation. Where are they sending you? Contractor support, training role, private security firm that does executive protection, quiet work, no publicity, no chance for the story to become legend that encourages other people to disobey orders. How do you feel about that? Emma thought about the question, about the 5 dead, about the 17 alive, about Ethan's dog tags in her pocket and the knowledge that she'd done something impossible that everyone said couldn't be done. I feel like I did what I enlisted to do, made the shot when making the shot mattered. Everything else is just administration. 3 months later, Emma Caldwell reported to her new assignment, a private military contractor that specialized in training executive protection specialists. Quiet work, professional, no combat, no headlines, no opportunities to become the legend that would inspire others to climb impossible ridges. Maddox visited her the day before she left Coronado, found her on the rifle range where she'd spent 3 months training in darkness. She was running through dry fire drills, even though the mission was over and the scores didn't matter anymore. You don't have to prove anything anymore, Emma. She lowered her rifle. I'm not proving anything, Sergeant. I'm maintaining proficiency. For what you're going to a training role, executive protection doesn't require 1,200-meter shots. Emma smiled slightly, sad in the way people smile when they know something others don't. Next time might require different skills, different distances, different stakes. I need to be ready for whatever next time brings. Maddox understood then what Emma had become. Not someone who'd accomplished an impossible mission and could rest on achievement. Someone who'd learned that impossible was negotiable and had decided that negotiation was a continuous process. The ridge got designated on military maps, he said. Overwatch Point Caldwell. Future units operating in that region will know that position exists, know someone proved it could be reached and used effectively. No plaques, though, no publicity. No, just quiet recognition on maps that most people will never see. Is that enough? Emma thought about Ethan, about Boomer and Kincaid, about Finn Ashford and Jasper Drummond and Beckett Thorne, about all the people who'd paid prices so others could go home. Yes, Sergeant, that's enough. The mission mattered, the outcome mattered. The rest is just noise. Maddox handed her an envelope. Letters from the 17 survivors. They wanted you to have these. Emma took the envelope but didn't open it. Thank you, Sergeant. Emma, I was wrong about you. Wrong about what you could do. Wrong about protecting you by keeping you away from danger. I'm sorry. You were trying to keep another young woman from dying like your daughter did. I understand that now. Understanding doesn't mean I agree with it, but it means I don't blame you for it. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Maddox extended his hand. Emma shook it. The gesture carried everything that military formality couldn't contain. Respect, gratitude, recognition that they'd both changed in that desert valley in ways that would last long after wounds healed. 6 months after the mission that would be classified for decades, Emma Caldwell worked as a civilian contractor training executive protection specialists at a facility outside Atlanta. The work was professional, quiet, nothing like the chaos of combat. She trained former military personnel in precision shooting, taught them how to read wind, how to calculate distance without rangefinders, how to make shots that mattered when everything else had failed. One afternoon, a new student asked the question that everyone eventually asked. Did you ever see real combat? Emma smiled the same sad smile she'd given Maddox. Once, one night, learned everything I needed to know. What did you learn? That impossible is just another word for what no one's tried yet. That missing 3 times doesn't mean failing if you take the 4th shot. That the people who matter know what you did, even if the world never does. The student didn't understand, didn't need to. Some lessons could only be learned in valleys where mathematics said you should die, and stubbornness said you'd find another way. Sergeant Reese Maddox continued training SEAL recruits at Coronado. His approach to evaluation changed after that night in the desert. He still cared about physical capability, still understood that combat made demands on strength and endurance. But he stopped assuming that capability could be predicted by appearance. Stopped thinking that protecting people from danger was the same as preparing them for it. When female recruits entered his selection courses, Maddox evaluated them the way Emma had taught him to evaluate, on performance, on determination, on the qualities that mattered when everything else failed. His daughter Emily graduated SEAL training 2 years later. Maddox stood in the crowd and watched her receive her trident with pride, that came from understanding that protection meant preparation, not prevention. The northern ridge, designated as Overwatch Point Caldwell, appeared on military topographical maps without explanation, just coordinates and designation. Future units operating in that region would see the name and wonder about its origin. Some would research. Find classified reports that mention a hostage rescue mission. Find casualty lists that recorded 5 KIA and 17 WIA. Find recommendations for valor that disappeared into administrative decisions about what could be rewarded publicly versus what required quiet recognition. Most would never know the full story, would never know about a 27-year-old communications specialist who climbed an impossible ridge and made an impossible shot after missing 3 times. Would never know about Boomer Garrett and Wade Kincaid buying time with their lives. Would never know about the cost paid in blood and sacrifice in decisions that broke people who had to make them. But 17 people knew. 17 survivors who went home to families and lives and futures that shouldn't have existed except for someone who refused to accept that impossible meant no. They knew. They remembered. They carried the story in scars visible and invisible. And sometimes in the quiet spaces between official history and personal memory, that was enough. Emma Caldwell kept Ethan's dog tags in her pocket, carried them every day like a reminder of why she'd enlisted, why she'd trained, why she'd climbed a ridge that everyone said couldn't be climbed and made a shot that everyone said couldn't be made. Not for glory, not for validation, not for recognition that would fade before the bodies were buried. For the simple, brutal, beautiful reason that when someone needed a shot that mattered, she'd been ready to take it. One shot, make it count. Everything else was just noise.